I loved my grandma. She used to bake me cookies, the kind with the chocolate chips. When Mom said I couldn't have them anymore, Grandma still baked them and let me eat them before Mom came home from work. At night, Grandma used to read me bedtime stories. Not those stupid fairy tale ones. Grandma told me ghost stories. They were gory and grotesque and most of all, exciting. We would stay up at night and talk for hours and hours. She was like my best friend. Mom was always yelling at me and complaining about every little thing I did. Grandma always stuck up for me. Whenever Mom said I had to do my homework, Grandma would always help me, and sometimes she would even do my homework for me. Even though Grandma didn't have a job, she was always buying me presents. All Mom and Dad did was complain about how we didn't have any money and everything cost so much, and how I needed to behave myself. Grandma never said a bad word about me, but what I liked best about Grandma was that she never punished me like Mom and Dad did. She let me do whatever I wanted to do. Sometimes Mom and Dad would lock me in my room, but when they went out, Grandma would come up and let me out. Those are the reasons why I loved my grandma more than everyone else in the whole wide world. Every day, I would run home from school to see what kind of cookies or treats Grandma had for me. Then, one day, all of that changed. That was the day I found out there wouldn't be any more cookies, and there wouldn't be any more ghost stories, and there wouldn't be any more fun. Because when I got home that day and opened the front door, Grandma was lying in a heap at the bottom of the stairs. She looked kind of like a broken doll. Her arms and legs were sticking out at odd angles, and her head was twisted all the way around. Her glasses were broken, and she just stared up at me. But it was like she wasn't really seeing me. I tried to shake her to see if she would get up, but she was as stiff as a log and her body was as cold as ice. No matter how much I shook her, she just wouldn't get up. I knew it was bad when I couldn't hear her heart beating. I listened harder and harder, but I still couldn't hear anything. I don't remember much after that. I just sat there and waited for Mom and Dad to get home. They started crying and they called the police. Later, some men came to take Grandma away. I heard them saying she fell down the stairs. After Grandma went away, things started to get bad. Mom was crying all the time and Dad started drinking. At night, I heard them yelling at each other. Dad was complaining about Grandma. He said she spoiled me. I never did like Dad. He was always mean and the drink just seemed to make him meaner. Sometimes, when I did something bad, Dad would hit me and send me to my room. I didn't like that at all. I started wishing Grandma was there so things could go back to how they were before. Mom didn't talk very much and she stopped going to work. Sometimes she would take me out for a drive, and on the way home, we usually went to visit Grandma in the cemetery. One night, Dad stayed out late and Mom was in bed crying. I sneaked out of the house and went down to the cemetery. I took my bucket and spade with me and my little wagon. Mom had taken me to visit Grandma so many times that it was easy to find her grave. I started digging and digging. It was a really hard job, but I didn't care. I just wiped the sweat off my brow and just kept digging. It took a long time to dig up the coffin, and when I finally opened it, Grandma didn't look very good. She didn't look good at all. Her eyes were gone and her skin was all leathery and brown. Her lips were pulled back and it looked like she was grinning at me. I could tell she was glad I dug her up, and I knew that if I took her back home, she would start feeling better in no time. I decided to keep Grandma in my room so I could be with her all the time. That night, we had a long talk and she told me a lot of stories. She told me all about what she had been up to while she was away. I told her how Dad had gotten really mean, and she said she knew what to do about Dad. We had to be quiet when I heard Dad come home. He was stumbling up the stairs like he usually did after he had been drinking. He made so much noise, he must have woken Mom up. A few minutes later, I heard Mom and Dad fighting, and it was worse than it had ever been. Then I heard Mom screaming. I ran into their room and saw Dad beating Mom with a belt. Then he started choking her. Before I could do anything, Mom stopped moving and Dad started telling her to get up and stop pretending. He shook her, but she still didn't get up. Then he noticed me standing in the doorway. "What do you want, you little pest?" he said. "Grandma's not going to like this," I replied. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Grandma was right about you," I said. "You never were any good and you're only going to get worse. Grandma's in my room right now and she knows what you did." I don't think he believed me, but he had to see for himself. He pushed me out of the way and stormed into my bedroom. That's when Dad got the shock of his life. Grandma was sitting there grinning at him. "Oh my God," he gasped. Grandma had already told me what to do about Dad. She even told me which drawer the meat cleaver was in. While Grandma kept Dad distracted, I was able to creep up behind him. After I chopped up Dad's body, Grandma smiled at me and told me what a smart kid I was. "Thanks, Grandma," I said. "But this was your idea. You're the smart one." After that, it was just Grandma and me. It was even better than it had been before. We had such a great time together and there was no one around to bother us. We stayed up all night and talked, and Grandma told me ghost stories. A 21-year-old man went on holiday to the Bahamas. When he arrived at his hotel, he found everything to his liking. The weather was perfect, the beach was immaculate, the hotel was high class, and the atmosphere was exciting. That night, he put on his most fragrant aftershave, donned an expensive shirt, and went down to the hotel bar for a drink. He spotted a beautiful woman in a revealing red dress standing at the bar. She was incredibly attractive, with long dark hair, deep brown eyes, tanned skin, full lips, round hips, and ample charms. She had it all. The man stared at her and was enchanted by her eyes, so much so that he instantly fell in love. Gathering his courage, he sauntered over to the woman and stood next to her at the bar. When the opportunity arose, he leaned in and asked if he could buy her a drink. Imagine his disappointment when she refused and dismissed him with a wave of her hand. It made him crazy. He felt rejected and became very annoyed. It was as if she had stabbed him straight through the heart. He was so disappointed that he returned to his hotel room, hanging his head in shame. The next night, he was back at the bar and he spotted her again. This time, he would give it a second chance. "Hi, my name's Josh," he said, flashing a smile. "Why would I care what your name is?" she asked. "I thought maybe we could get to know each other a little better," he said hopefully. "I'd rather chew my own leg off," was her withering reply. Again, the young man found himself making his way back to his room, feeling humiliated. The next day, as he was exploring the city, he walked past an old woman who was selling her wares by the side of the street. He saw that she had a sign that read, "Spell casting and black magic." Stopping at her cart, he asked her if she had something that could make a woman fall head over heels in love with a man. The woman smiled and told him that she had the perfect solution for him. She held up a small bottle with a heart emblazoned on the glass. It contained a red, syrup-like liquid. She told him that it was a love potion. The man eagerly took the bottle and paid her for it. As he was leaving, the old woman warned him to only put a single drop into the drink of the woman he intended to use it on. Otherwise, she said, he might regret it. That night, the young man strode into the bar and sat down at the young woman. He began to speak with her gently. She turned her head as if to avoid it. He took the opportunity to pour the love potion into her glass. In case the potion was ineffective, he poured the entire bottle into her drink. 20 minutes later, the woman turned to him and smiled. Her eyes glittered and her pupils dilated. Before he could say a word, she threw herself on him and began to kiss him passionately. The man couldn't believe his luck. The love potion actually worked. They spent the entire night in a romantic embrace, kissing and cuddling like newlyweds. When morning came, the woman wanted to surprise him. She decided to prepare a lovely breakfast and went looking for cream cheese and croissants. Unfortunately, the minute she set foot outside the hotel, she was run over by a car. The car tires squished her head into a bloody pulp and she died on the spot. The young man spent the whole day crying. As night fell, he began to get over her, but he found himself unable to sleep. As he lay in bed, tossing and turning, he suddenly sensed a presence in the room. Turning over, he was horrified to see the ghostly figure of the woman in red crouching down by the door. When she raised her head, he realized that the skin on her face had been ripped off, revealing the bone underneath. Before he had a chance to react, she jumped on him and began kissing him passionately, mashing her bony teeth and mutilated lips against his mouth. He screamed and screamed, but she didn't let go until morning. Every night she returned, until the end of his life. When my father retired from his job, he had a lot of time on his hands. He began looking around for something to occupy himself. "That space at the end of the hallway is such a waste," he said. "We could turn it into a storage room." My father was like a man possessed, and he spent 2 days working on his new project. He hung 2 shelves on the wall and fitted a door, creating a small cupboard at the end of the hallway. When I came home the next day, he was nowhere to be seen, and I noticed that there was a shiny new padlock on the door of the storage room. The following evening, my father still hadn't returned. My mother was very anxious and begged me to look inside the storage room. Both of us were wondering what he was keeping in there. I broke the padlock and opened the door. Inside, we found my father sitting on the floor. His eyes were vacant and he was laughing softly to himself. What was he doing? How did he lock the door from the inside? We never got an answer to our questions because my father had gone insane. Today, he is still sitting alone in his storage room, staring into space and smiling happily to himself. Last year, I was flying home from a business trip, and when my plane was delayed in an unfamiliar city. Forced to spend the night there, I searched online and booked a cheap hotel that was close to the airport. When I arrived at the hotel, I was disappointed by how dirty and shabby it was. I thought about trying to find another hotel, but everything was fully booked that weekend. When I got to my room, there was a heavy, unpleasant smell in the air. The whole atmosphere felt stifling and cold. I pulled back the bedclothes and found something strange on the sheets beneath. It was a pair of rusty metal scissors. Ugh, this is terrible, I said to myself. The maid hasn't even bothered to clean the room properly. I picked them up in disgust and placed them on the bedside table. I was so tired that I couldn't stay awake. I went to bed and decided I would complain about the scissors in the morning. Lying between the dirty sheets, I closed my eyes and tried to fall asleep. In the middle of the night, I had an unusual dream. I felt a heavy weight pressing down on me, and I got the strangest feeling that someone was watching me. I'm not sure what time I woke up, but the room was still pitch black. When I reached out and switched on the bedside lamp, my hair stood on end. The rusty scissors were lying on my chest, and the blades were closed on either side of my neck, digging into the skin. One more inch and the scissors would have cut my throat.